Hello everybody, it's Chibi, and today I'm here to bring you a review on RWBY Volume 2, Episode 2. Now, I love this episode, and really this episode had a lot of plot going down and a lot of foreshadowing, and I want to mention this real quick. Rooster Teeth recently, I've noticed in these past two episodes, are really doing some good job with adding in some dark themes and elements into it, and at the exact same time, they're really making the overall contrast and threat of whatever's to come in the future really grand. So, I can't wait to find out exactly what they plan on doing with the story of RWBY Volume 2, and I've noticed that some of these themes they've had, like these dark themes, are starting to show in even Red vs. Blue, and so I love how Rooster Teeth is trying to make, their series they make a little bit more mature, and at the exact same time, they're trying to make it a lot different than they used to do in the past. Now, the big thing with this episode is that it was 13 minutes, which I am happy with. They actually had, once again, another long episode. I thought for a fact that since the first episode was like 13 to 14 minutes long, that was just because it was the pilot episode of Volume 2. But to find out when I came into this episode, Episode 2 of Volume 2, was actually 13 minutes long, I was like, fuck yes, Rooster Teeth. That was one of the biggest things I had a problem with RWBY Volume 1 because of the short runtime. For instance, like only 6 minutes to 8 minutes. I was like, oh my god, that annoys the hell out of me. So I'm happy how they're trying to put in more, I guess, plot development, different scenes into one specific episode, and it really makes me happy. I'm glad they're doing that extra effort to add in more things in one episode. Now, the episode, let's talk about the CGI a little bit, okay? The CGI of this episode, for the most part, looked good. The voice acting looked on par with the lip sync, so I can't complain about the lip sync. The CGI for, Rooster Teeth making some form of anime, it looks good for their company not being, familiar when making anime products. I will say the CGI from this episode does look good. Now, one thing, though, I did notice about this episode, which I am not going to deny or lie about. I'm a big Rooster Teeth fan and a RWBY fan. I have followed them for a long time, but I will mention these flaws. There was one flaw in this episode when I saw, like, for instance, when you see RWBY crying, okay, there's a scene in this episode specifically where she's starting to cry, see tears going down her eyes. It looked really funny. It looked really cool, and I like the effect of the way they added in, the way it looks like regular anime characters crying or when they get upset. It's something you would see in regular anime. But in that scene, when you see the CGI on the tears, when you see RWBY move her head over, you'll see, like, the tears clip inside of the shoulder, and it looks really, really wonky and weird. So, I don't know if they actually purposely intended that, but that's a little bit weird, especially for CGI. I get to see something like that, so hopefully we don't get to see a bunch of that type of stuff, but that's something I do want to bring up. It's not a big issue. I mean, it can easily be overlooked, and you can overlook it. It's not a big concern, but, I mean, I wanted to mention that because that's the only thing I really felt that was awkward about the CGI in this episode, especially with the tears and the way I saw it clip through the characters. So, besides that, for the most part, Rooster Teeth held up with the CGI in this episode. Now, I want to talk about the overall plot. Now, let's talk about the plot setup. So, from the beginning, right at the beginning, we see a lot of foreshadowing build up. Like the first episode, we had a lot of foreshadowing going up with all our cast of characters, for instance, finding out that they're not going to be children for long. Well, in this episode, we find out that these headmasters are talking, one of them's brought their armies in, and at the exact same time, there seems to be some form of mentioning or prophecy or something going on in the future to lead to a big war. And so, you have our academies, like Beacon Academy, making huntsmen, training soldiers, pretty much, to be able to fight in a war. And so this directly links to what the headmaster first said in the first episode of Volume 2, saying they will not be children forever. And this episode mainly just set up the foreshadowing for the upcoming battle. Whatever this battle is, whatever is coming, probably beast, like these demon beasts coming in, but still, they're foreshadowing this a lot. Rooster Teeth is definitely doing that, so definitely I think this Volume 2 is going to have a lot of impact around this entire subject, and that can crucially lead to whatever you have our main villains doing at the end of this episode. They've infiltrated Beacon Academy, and they're joining this festival, so we'll have to see exactly what they're trying to do in Beacon Academy. They might have something locked up there. The headmaster might have something very secret or safe locked up in a safe or somewhere, and that may be why they're there, to probably steal something like that. But one thing I do want to mention, there was a reference to X-Ray and Vav. You saw a comic, and actually there was a comic that was X-Ray and Vav last week's episode. I didn't mention, I failed to mention it, but I did notice it. But in this week's episode, once again, you get to see that reference of X-Ray and Vav, and I'm glad they're getting those little references put into RWBY. That's something I really enjoyed about in Volume 1 of RWBY, because there was different links and references to each individual, series. For instance, like last week's episode, they had Puma, and I laughed my fucking ass off because that Puma reference to Red vs. Blue just killed me. It killed me inside. I was like, oh my god, that's so fucking great. And so, personally, the episode held up. It was good. It was positive regression. At the exact same time, it managed to hold and retain that comedy. Now, I do want to bring up something about this episode. There was a reference that I did not expect, and it's kind of obvious if you think about the influence of Ray and Gavin and Michael. For instance, you saw a little bit of Yu-Gi-Oh! In this episode of RWBY. Now, they specifically didn't say Yu-Gi-Oh!, but they might as well have said it because it was just completely a direct reference to it because you had the cards. I activate my trap card. I'm like, oh my fucking god, they're actually referencing Yu-Gi-Oh! And I was laughing. I was really laughing because it was just so funny getting to see, like, an element like that. Because this is something you would see in a parody anime, and that was really shocking to see. And at the exact same time, that entire board game with cards reminded me something of the Shadow Realm or Dungeons & Dragons. So I give Rooster Teeth props on that for taking the time to add in a reference like that. Now, the big thing, though, is I will be shocked if they add in some non-mainstream anime references. Like, I mean, they love referencing their series, their different things, which I understand why they do that. But if they really want to expand to broader audiences, I think they should do more cultural references, especially directly linked to anime, since a lot of anime fans most likely is going to watch RWBY instead of watching Rooster Teeth because it looks anime. And so, I'm interested to see if Rooster Teeth will eventually add some major references like Dragon Ball Z references, or let's say Yu Yu Hakusho references, stuff like that. It would be really fucking funny if they did something like that. But, for the most part, episode was good, solid, and I would give the episode, if I had to say 1 through 10, I'd say a 7 out of 10. It's not the best, but it's still fucking hilarious, and it is Rooster Teeth. So everybody, tell me your thoughts about this episode. Did you enjoy it? Did you hate it? What was your favorite moments about it? I love all of you so much. You have a wonderful day or night wherever you live. Please be safe. Chibi out.